Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So Thursday, April 21st. I assume, now that you're, this big hippie, you had a wonderful 420.
Bill, you might not have noticed that I'm not a hippie anymore.
Did you do another cut?
Well, I mean, what do you think? It's maybe I'm more of a yuppie these days or something. I'm not sure.
But, I mean, you had a haircut last time we talked, but it was still kind of like, stoner skate punk. Did you do a second cut, or you're just combing back?
I'm just combing back, but I feel like it's pretty. I think it's fairly short. By the way, speaking of skate, I just watched the Tony Hawk documentary.
See, there, that's what I'm talking about,
that?
Man. No, I haven't, because I'm not a stoner skate punk like you.
I could not skate worth, I wouldn't last 2 seconds, but interesting stuff. Look, I like to study anybody who's at the top of their game in whatever field and who's stayed there, who's this is a guy, Tony Hawk. I first heard of him like in 1986 in middle school, and he's still getting it done. So I always admire anybody I can learn something from. I'm game. So check that out. I think it's on HBO.
Now, Matt, have you kept up with Cocaine and Rhinestones?
No, I listened to the George Jones episodes, which I know you were not. You feel like George Jones is overrated. It may not be the quintessential country star that the podcast makes him out to be, but man, was that crazy. I did not realize that George Jones, not only did he have these obviously major drinking problems, but he had been like put in a psych ward, and he had these alternate personalities that would come out, possibly demon possessed, depending on your theology and psychology. But I feel like I haven't listened in about a month, so I don't know.
I mean, I picked up the thread. I'm still in season 2, which is the George Jones season, and I'm on episode 14. And so I definitely think it takes a while to kind of pick up steam that season, but I do feel it's coming together pretty well.
Yeah, once they get into like George Jones being full blown, like in a just insane, like he could have killed people, multiple personalities, being committed. And again, though, Bill, you bring something up, though. He was someone who had to battle back. You'll remember in the 90s, he had this song, I don't need your rocking chair, your Geritol or your Medicare. I've still got lightning in these veins, something like that. This gray hair don't mean a thing. George Jones could not get on country radio. He was arguably the greatest country singer in history, and they would not put him on the radio, and it pissed him off. And just like Johnny Cash, obviously had the same problem.
So if folks haven't sampled that podcast, I would start from the beginning. I started season 1 because season 1 is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But if you like George Jones, you'll love season 2. It takes a bit for me to get into it, because even after 4 episodes, I mean, George Jones is an interesting story, but I'm still a little hung up on. I don't think he is as great as obviously many people who are country fans think.
Yeah, it's an interesting podcast. Is it Tyler Mahan Coe?
Yeah,
is the guy's name? David Allan Coe's son,
right? And David Allan Coe is a little on the periphery of the George Jones story, so that's fun. But
the podcast will start off with doing like 20 minutes on something completely different. Like it might be 20 minutes on beauty pageants or 20 minutes on bullfighting, and just a deep dive into bullfighting, which seems apropos of nothing.
And I still don't even get what he's doing there.
Usually there's some sort of literary device that ties into the narrative about George Jones or country music. But yeah, in some cases, I'm not even sure what it is.
I mean, maybe it's all going to tie together by episode 18. I don't know. But, there's the bullfight. There was a lot of bullfighting, pageants. There's a couple on, drag balls, and drag performances. And I still don't see where the parallels are.
Well, it is called Cocaine and Rhinestone, so I'm guessing he may be on cocaine when he's making the podcast. But in some cases, that brings out the brilliance. I mean, I've got my drug of choice right here, Billy. Coffee.
Not Star Wars.
This is a weird cup. It's about the Orioles and Chewbacca. You want to talk about something that's apropos of nothing and a non sequitur.
What is that slogan? It's like, let Baltimore win? It's like, hey, come on, guys. We know we suck, but can you let us win one, please?
This is where we've come. It used to be like, once it was like, come to Birdland, and it was like Oriole Magic, catch it. Now it's like, let us win. We know we're in the same division with the Yankees and the Red Sox. Let Baltimore win.
Everyone gets a trophy.
Yeah, it's come to this in Mudville, my man. It's not great times.
Well, I know
my brother-in-law claims that there's even talk that the Orioles could move to Vegas. I have not independently verified this, but that would suck.
Well, I'm going to next month take my 2 children to their first. Well, I did take them to a baseball game when they were really small in the New England Collegiate Baseball League. That's like really, really small time. That's like going to like a high school baseball field, just sitting in the bleachers there. I showed them an article about all the food at the new Worcester Woo Sox Stadium, which was it's only been in business for a couple of years. And how they have all this crazy food there. And like they have zero interest in baseball whatsoever, but loaded sundaes and crazy cheesy fries like that. That was enough to be, hey, let's all go. So I got 4 tickets to a Woo Sox game in Worcester next month, and we'll see what a disaster that outing will be.
Yeah, I've been thinking about taking the kids to see the Frederick Keys as well, because all of my forays into Major League Baseball with the kids have ended by the 5th inning. And let's be honest, minor league baseball is just as fun, particularly if you're just there, to, in their case, eat Dippin' Dots. Right. So we'll see. I got to look up the schedule, but minor league baseball is hard to beat.
I mean, I'm annoyed with the Worcester. I mean, the Worcester team moved from Pawtucket, and they used to be an Oriole affiliate, didn't they? No. The Pawtucket Sox. This is a long time Red Sox affiliate.
Red Sox. Okay, I hear about them because the same division with the.
And the Paw Sox Stadium, McCoy Field, was a fantastic stadium, an old timey stadium, and so it's annoying that they got the shaft and for a sparkly new corporate stadium in Worcester. But they're closer to me than Pawtucket, so I'm gonna go.
Do they wear are their uniforms like red and
could not tell you. I can't remember what their team name is next. I know they're called the Woo Sox. I tend to go when I go to. I have a friend in Connecticut. We go to do the Hartford Yard Goats.
Yes,
which is actually closer to me than Worcester. That's a
good name.
And they you can get a burger. That's the Dunkin' Donuts park. You can get a burger on 2 donuts there.
See, I'm thinking the Yard Goats are probably safe from cancellation. Now the Keys, it's a cool, the logo is a key, like a door key, but they're named after Francis Scott Key, and he could be problematic, Bill. So, now the Hagerstown Suns, who used to be in the Oriole affiliate, also problematic because of the ultraviolet rays and the ozone layer. So I like Yard Goats. And I like that you're taking your kids to celebrate the American pastime as it is.
We'll see if they watch any of the game whatsoever or just pester me for food nonstop. We should get down to business. So just I think this morning, New York Times broke the story, and I think this is out of the upcoming book from Jonathan Martin and Alex Burns.
Yep.
That in the immediate aftermath of January 6th, the House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy said, I've had enough of this guy, and said he was going to tell Trump he should resign. Mitch McConnell was confident that he would be impeached and convicted. So the Democrats are going to take care of this for us and assume that he could get 17 Republicans to come along to convict. And then both became quickly disabused of this notion that Republicans would be mad that Donald Trump led an insurrection, and quickly backed down and got, I mean, in the case of McConnell, Trump still isn't happy with him and calls him old crow, but McConnell did not vote to convict and has tried to sort of keep his disagreement with Trump on a relatively low simmer. So what does this say to you, Matt, about the state of the Republican Party?
Okay, so obviously still Trump's party, although we do see some signs that Trump could be fading a little bit. Not Trumpism, but Trump. And so I think that part of the story here is that this was the chance. Like imagine, I'm trying to think, because I'm going to write about this. I'm trying to think of the analogy, and there isn't a perfect analogy. I was like, there's In the Line of Fire, the Clint Eastwood, John Malkovich movie, where, Clint Eastwood's partner thinks he has John Malkovich. And he's like, hey, Frank, we got him. And then he gets killed. But that's not quite right either, right? And then there's Rocky IV, where Ivan Drago seems like unbeatable until there's the scene where it's like, he's cut, the Russians cut, and it's a bad cut, when you get the guy who seems invincible and you catch him, you've got to finish it. You've got to, as John Kreese would say in Karate Kid, finish him. But I'm trying to think of like exactly what the analogy is, because, it's sort of like, you've been kidnapped and you're tied up and like, but then there's this moment where the door, the breeze like blows the door open and you have a second when you could escape and you don't take it. Like this was their moment, not only to take a chance at vanquishing Trump, but also Trumpism. Now, I think that McCarthy and McConnell are playing this like, don't get mad, don't get even, get ahead game. And obviously they're putting their own career ahead of principle and the party and the country. But even still, even though they have survived, they're not leading anything. And Trump is still lingering over them, plaguing them. So I think they missed I think they had a chance. I think it was like a brief moment when they had a chance to do the right thing for the country and themselves. And I think they missed the moment.
I would think that, you ran the Trump experiment for 4 years. And in that time, Donald Trump lost both houses of Congress and the presidency.
Yeah.
So I get that he has a pretty strong hold on a lot of the Republican base, although I think, we'll know more in a couple years' time. But I do with that the hold is a little overblown. If everyone did whatever Trump said all the time, Purdue would be cleaning Brian Kemp's clock in Georgia right now, and he's not.
Yep, exactly.
Now, there are other examples, like Ted Budd in North Carolina does seem to have gotten some boost from Trump over Pat McCrory in that primary. But Mo Brooks was not helped in Alabama. We'll see how J.D. Vance does, in Ohio. But I think Georgia's pretty marquee, because Georgia is so front and center in the Trump lie. If you can't dislodge Brian Kemp, who is at the center of Trump's complaint about the 2020 election, that just says to me that, it's a lot of puffery. People might like that Trump drives liberals insane. Republicans might not want to validate a media narrative about Trump. That makes them reluctant to, say, impeach, convict him for January 6th. But it's not quite the same as I want to follow Trump to the ends of the earth.
And I think you've described it exactly right. Trump is still the leader of the party. if the election were held today, he still wins, but he's not omnipotent, and he can't just his popularity is not transferable. So he has limits.
And his popularity has limits. Otherwise, he'd be president today.
Sure. But I mean, even within the Republican Party itself,
right.
It has limits. And by the way, I mean, this goes without saying, but like Ron DeSantis is for real. I mean, he's legit. And I'm not saying he's going to be the nominee, but I take him very seriously.
Well, I know we're probably getting a little bit off track here. I am reluctant to assume that DeSantis is a lock for re-election this year in the governor's race. I want to see, maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll see some data that will say, okay, fine. But I feel like, I mean, he is following a Trump-ish playbook where he not only, engages aggressively in culture war fights, he creates them. He goes out of his way to create culture war fights.
But unlike Trump, he actually wins them.
Well, I mean, again,
so
Trump seemed like he was the alpha dog for a long time until he lost everything. So, I mean, DeSantis.
No, but I don't think I didn't get the sense that Trump was actually accomplishing things for the right legislatively. I mean, well, he's passing tax cuts that Paul Ryan wants. He's nominating judges that Romney.
Those are the two things that Trump got. I mean,
yeah.
And he got criminal justice reform, which according to Tom Cotton was the biggest mistake of all time. So,
right.
I mean, it was a total bunch of goose eggs, but it certainly wasn't. They couldn't repeal Obamacare, was pretty hamstrung otherwise legislatively, and was deeply unpopular in the country, and lost Congress and the presidency. So, DeSantis has a more compliant legislature, but it remains to be seen, to me, whether he is governing in a way that the voters of Florida want and will be rewarded for.
Now, dude, if he loses re-election, that would be just unbelievable, especially this year, right? Which is going to be
should be a Republican year.
A Republican year. So, I mean, I'm assuming that he will be reelected, but if he is not, that is an amazing story.
Well, I had a tweet that really took off sort of bizarrely to me, because it was just sort of like an idle thought. But I said to it, if DeSantis does win re-election, it really solidifies, in my mind, like this is not a swing state.
Yep.
If DeSantis, I mean, granted, it's potentially a Republican year, but this would be if he wins, it would be the fourth election in a row, both presidential and midterm years, where Florida went red, whether for president or for governor, not to mention Senate. There's two Republican senators in there now. And that happened even in years that were otherwise blue years. I mean, Florida is one of the very few states on the 2020 map where Trump did better than he did 4 years ago. Almost even in the reddest.
Dude, I remember, because it was like the first swing state. I'll put that in quotes, swing. It was the first swing state that reported on, because it's most of the state is Eastern time.
Right.
Time zone, and you thought, okay, here we go again. Trump's gonna win. Trump's gonna win again.
But even most of the reddest states of the country were slightly less Trumpy compared to 4 years ago. I mean, not so much to be like, oh my God, they're turning blue, but like it just shows there was a general blue shift nationally in 2020, with pretty much the lone exception of Florida. So, if DeSantis not only wins, but is winning while being extraordinarily right wing. And some concerns like, all he wants is to stop grooming. All he wants is to save children. I mean, come on, he is calling math textbooks CRT with no evidence. He's attacking Disney. Disney. I mean, it's not just any company. Disney.
Yeah. Disney. Well, I think Disney is. I'm not a fan of Disney for a variety of reasons, but they were like untouchable in Florida. I mean, Florida.
This is the largest employer in the state. They bring in 58 million tourists a year on average. This is not just a company. This is part of the Florida identity. I mean, can you think about Joe Manchin saying, "Screw you, Cole"? I mean, you wouldn't do that. A coal company says, "You know what? Let's not be super racist." Screw you, Cole.
I'm tired of woke Cole telling us what to do here in the Mountain State.
So, but maybe DeSantis has his finger on the pulse better than I do. All I'm saying, like, if he can do that, if he can attack Disney, if he can just make up charges about math textbooks out of whole cloth and still win re-election, that just says to me, this is not a swing state.
Yeah. But part of it is just like, how refreshing is it for it? And don't get me wrong, I got a lot of problem with DeSantis, but it is refreshing to see a politician stand up to a corporation like this. It's because we don't see it that much. So it again, I think that Disney
were you celebrating AOC standing up to Amazon?
No, but I don't think it's a perfect analogy, but let me just say this. In the case of DeSantis, like, I don't think Disney should have been given all these perks that they were given in Florida to begin with. However, I also think you shouldn't target them as political retribution.
Right, if you want to get argued, like, companies shouldn't get special breaks.
Right.
Major League Baseball shouldn't have an antitrust exemption.
Exactly.
If you want to sit on principle, you'll go ahead. But like, this has been in place for decades, clearly to the economic benefit of the state.
And DeSantis didn't say a word about it, as far as I know.
This is straight up like, what Disney did about the Don't Say Gay bill was pretty mild. It's not like they're on the rampage about this bill. They were hesitant to say anything about it. They got pressured by their own employees. They put out some kind of statement. I mean, like, DeSantis could be a big boy and be like, "Yeah, whatever, Disney, I don't care. The bill's passed. Let's move on here." Like, he's going out of his way to exact retribution for having the temerity to have its own statement. I mean, talk about cancel culture, for Pete's sake.
Yeah, well, and I think, part of it, Donald Trump had this authoritarian idea that, like, remember, he was like a president, and if he called you to express condolences and then you ever voted against him, I forget who it was. Someone's husband died. He called her to express condolences, and then she voted against him. And he took that as like a personal affront. Or even worse, if he used, I think John McCain got like a state funeral or something like that. And then, like, in Trump's mind, hey, I did them a favor. Like, no, it's the United States government, number one, and it's not your money or whatever. But then he expects, like, payback for that. And then similarly, I think DeSantis is basically saying to Disney, hey, the state of Florida gives you all of these, benefits. You need to be on board with me because I am the state. And that I have a problem with.
So if Florida is a swing state, if Florida has a good chunk of swing voters, I would think they would not react kindly to that kind of behavior. I mean, 2022, sure, it looks like it's going to be a Republican year on the federal level. But I mean, you look back at past midterms, it's not like, usually at a midterm year, there are a lot of governor's races up. It's not like it usually is a shutout. Only the out party at the federal level wins all the contested governor's races. There's usually a lot of anomalies at the state level. And in a year where, let's say inflation is still very bad by November, that could be bad for incumbents generally. So if I'm DeSantis, I wouldn't just be like waltzing along, assuming I can do whatever the heck I want and win no matter what. I know he's up in the polls right now, but I've not seen a fresh poll in, I think, a couple months. So I'm curious if we look at, if there's May polling, if he takes any kind of, if he gets knocked down a notch or two based on how he's behaving at this point in time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think he really made he made the right bet on COVID. It was risky, made the right bet there. I like that he's standing up to Disney. even with the major caveats. And it's going to be a really good Republican year. So I would be very surprised if he's in any trouble at all. And I think he could be the next president even. But Bill, people don't give us credit for bringing up things that end up happening on this show. So, keep an eye on it. Maybe it's not smooth sailing after all.
And I don't want to spend, we've talked about this a lot before, so I don't want to rehash, but I do think Florida is one of those places where a Supreme Court decision on Roe in the summer could be a very, very big deal. With DeSantis, he didn't go full Texas. He didn't go heartbeat 6-week ban. He went for a 15-week ban like Mississippi. So that might be a little, making some hardcore, pro-lifers grouchy. But generally speaking, he's taking a anti-abortion stand in a state that has not been historically anti-abortion. And if that gets validated by a Supreme Court action, does that give some juice to whoever the Democratic nominee is going to be? I think that's something to look out for.
I want to interrupt. I'm trying to line up a Florida person because it is interesting how the state, as you noted, has trended Republican, right? And so, there's theories for it. Trump ostensibly is now a resident of Florida. Maybe that helps. I don't know. You got a lot of, maybe it's sort of self-selecting. A lot of sort of Trumpy old people move to Florida.
Oh, yeah, I think it's a combination of old people moving in and
Cubans.
What we've seen with Hispanics generally.
Yeah.
Hispanics are not part and parcel Republicans, but there's certainly a healthy Republican contingent. There always has been.
But probably in Florida, more Hispanics who are fleeing socialism.
Correct. Both Cuba, Venezuela. But I do think nationally we are seeing, working class Hispanics being impressed by Republican culture war and not being all hung up on immigration.
It is interesting that I don't want to say class because that's not exactly right, but economic identity has supplanted or is starting to supplant race in terms of identity politics. That's a huge, if it sticks, that would be a huge shift.
So a lot going on in Florida, and I think it's important to keep an eye on.
I know you want to talk. This would be the perfect segue, Bill, to get into the Scher stuff. But before we do that, since I'm working on a column about McConnell and McCarthy, I don't want to let you off the hook. I need to steal some more of your ideas and stimulate some of mine. I mean, any other thoughts on what this tells us or what this means, if anything?
I'm curious if it hurts McCarthy at all. Trump is so weird because sometimes he is deeply aggrieved at any disloyalty and you are dead to him in response. Other times, if you suck up good enough afterwards, J.D. Vance had horrible things about Trump in 2016, but he's been a fantastic suck up ever since. And now Trump, went out of his way to endorse him. J.D. Vance is the underdog in the Ohio Senate primary.
Well, now, according to internal polling from his super PAC bill, J.D. Vance is now the front runner.
Well, let's see some non-internal polling. It could be.
Well, but remember, they put it out 2 months ago that he was in fifth place. So again, if you're going to lie, now would be the time because it's next month is the primary. But they were transparent about his problems a couple months ago.
And I think Trump wants to be seen as the guy who made people. I saved J.D. Vance's campaign, and so it's because of me that this happened.
Yeah.
And if J.D. Vance doesn't take off, well, that's your fault, not my fault, and I'll dump you and hop on whoever's the front runner, which he's doing in Alabama. Mo Brooks wasn't good enough, and so I'll wash my hands of you, and I don't get the blame for it. So Trump plays in a way that it's heads I win, tails you lose.
Don't you think too, though, that J.D. Vance, the reason J.D. Vance was able to grovel his way back in is partly because, just like Dr. Oz, J.D. Vance is kind of a celebrity in his own right. Like he had a celebrity brand, not just a politician.
Yeah, I think if you were a total milquetoast candidate, Trump wouldn't take a flyer on you. I mean, J.D. Vance is very provocative on Twitter, says lots of outrageous things.
He's like, Tucker Carlson has him on a lot. Yeah. Peter Thiel is funding him. So, like, it's not just that J.D. Vance groveled his way back in, but he had the celebrity status. He had powerful friends. So I think it was a combination.
So to get back to your question, does Kevin McCarthy have the political persona and the depth of subservience to keep Trump in his corner when, as it would seem to be the case, Republicans will be picking the next speaker? I mean, McCarthy has tried very, very hard to make everyone forget about the fact that he flinched on Trump in the immediate aftermath of January 6th. Has he done it successfully? So Trump brushes this off and says, McCarthy, he's with me. He's going to be a good, loyal soldier. Who cares what he said in the past? He'll do what I tell him to do as speaker, and that's good enough for me as I run in 2024. Or it's going to give Trump cause, say, you know what? Let's have some fun. I'll throw my weight behind somebody else for speaker in the aftermath of November, and let's see what happens.
Well, yeah, I think that the odds are McCarthy will be safe, partly because who would really want the job? And partly because I think McCarthy will do what Trump wants. But therein lies the problem. What good is it being the Speaker of the House? Look, there's a lot of jobs where you say to yourself, okay, I have to suck up to this guy for the next year, or I have to suck up to the voters. But once I'm in, then I'll be the man. Then I get to call the shots, What good is it to be the speaker if you get there and you're still a follower? You never get to do what you want to do.
I mean, what does Trump want from the House in 2023 and 24? I mean, I'm only speculating here, but I think this is probably pretty safe speculation. He doesn't want contract with America. He doesn't want a bunch of policies getting passed so you have a strong sense of what the Republican legislative agenda is going forward. He wants Biden investigated, ad nauseum. He wants to do Hunter laptop. He wants to maybe make up some fresh scandals. Anything to make the Democrats look utterly corrupt and blur the whole corruption issue going into 2024. And so if he is a speaker who's willing to greenlight every possible muckraking, garbage dump diving exploration possible, that's going to make Trump happy. If he has the confidence McCarthy's going to be that guy, then perhaps he'll stick by him.
Yeah, I think he will. I think McCarthy will do what he wants. But what good is that? It's like, remember there used to be this commercial years ago where they took these little kids and it was like, when I grow up, I want to be stuck in middle management.
Right.
Like, what good is it to, claw your way to the top and get the title of speaker, but you're still, answering to, at the beck and call of someone else. You're not able to do anything or change anything. I don't know. I mean, it's nice.
I mean, I don't know what this. I thought it was strange that John Boehner didn't go out in a blaze of glory in immigration reform, which he actually wanted to do. Mitch McConnell is not a Trumpist at heart, but he clearly has told himself, I got all these judges, and that's my legacy. So hanging around dealing with all the Trump nonsense was worth it for that. I mean, you got to tell yourself something, I suppose, to justify your existence.
Whatever gets you through the night, as they say. All right. Let's go ahead and then segue, Bill. To
you want to talk libs of TikTok?
Oh, you want to? Okay, let's do that. Yeah. So I am. It's getting weird, man. It's getting weird where like there are people like this Taylor Lorenz person that I'm just in the past few months vaguely familiar with. Like I've been in this career for, 15 years. And I start hearing names of people, and like I think she's got a couple 100,000 followers on Twitter, and is obviously very relevant in terms of the culture wars and tech. And yet, how do you keep up with these new characters that keep getting introduced into the writers? You know, it's.
Well, I'm with you. I've not had a lot of focus on her career. I don't care about internet and tech issues all that much, and internet culture all that much. So I haven't, been a big consumer of her work. I mean, and I even had a tweet at one point where I basically sort of said that I didn't care about something. And people got a little mad at me that I was being disrespectful. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to her, because as far as I know, she's a good reporter. And when I have read her stuff, it seems like quality reporting to me. Just I don't care about her beat for the most part. And I've seen that she's been in Glenn Greenwald's crosshairs for a long time, which just sort of confused me. Like, why does Glenn care about this? So anyway, so she does this story. And she is someone who her detractors have, harassed her viciously for years now. And it's kind of an example of sort of the risks of being a known reporter, because everyone hates
but
the
it
media.
Also, it seems like she's probably gotten a lot of where she is by virtue of being the kind of, and even scoring points off of being the victim, like, you don't know how hard it is, the PTSD. It's like, well, people called me, when I had long hair, I would get people saying I'm transitioning.
But I don't think what you went through with your hair is analogous to the kind of vitriol she's gone through.
I'm sure we've all gotten,
she's gone through.
I've gotten death threats. This is the first time you've ever heard about them. But I'm sure you have to. We all kind of get that stuff. But my point is, anyway, so, but I think that the pushback is, here she was complaining about people, threatening her, calling her names. I don't even know what. Could be very bad. But she was sort of playing the victim publicly about this. And then she goes out and exposes someone on the internet doing something controversial who was anonymous, right? And they call that doxing. Now, I don't know if that's doxing. I thought doxing was giving out like your address or your phone number, but you tell me.
Well, I mean, I don't want to claim to be like the arbiter of language here, but I do think there is a big difference between doxing, which is trying to expose somebody for the purposes of harassment, and reporting, which is learning about the activities that are happening in the public sphere and giving them broader context. I mean, she wasn't exposing the anonymous person on Libs of TikTok just so people will say mean things about her. She is someone doing something in a public space that's having impact on society and politics, that has become a media figure. I mean, she's getting people fired. She's getting attention from Fox News and the New York Post while trying to maintain anonymity. It's not illegitimate for a reporter to report and say, here's what you don't know about this story, and I'm giving you information about it.
So just for those who may not know, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but so the Libs of TikTok Twitter feed would curate stuff that progressives were putting on TikTok that made them, the progressives, appear to be crazy or out of touch or super left wing.
Right.
And this feed would edit that, aggregate it, and push it out to an audience who would be like, oh, look, see how crazy those left wingers are. See how evil they are.
Right.
And so then, in a way, it makes the world worse, too, because you have it used to be if a left wing person did something crazy in San Francisco, like none of us knew about it. We didn't care. But now we know, right? Like, do I need to know about Drag Story Hour or whatever?
I mean, you were about this, Matt. There are people on the right who are being very cavalier about calling people groomers based on their opinions on LGBT related issues, and in some cases conservatives who aren't even like, when you can say, hey, you know what, I don't hate this "Don't Say Gay" bill, but look, if you oppose it, doesn't make you a groomer. Now you're a groomer sympathizer because you said these sorts of things. I mean, and this is all very QAnon. We're run by this cabal of pedophiles, and this is all part of some larger conspiracy. The Libs of TikTok account is pushing that notion that these are groomers. And, I've not done the deepest dive here. I'm not aware of. I don't follow Libs of TikTok. I don't know all the things that gets put on there. But there's one case that I did notice in Taylor Lorenz's story. You had this young Oklahoma teacher who clearly is very politically radical, who did his own TikTok where he is speaking generally to kids, to LGBT kids whose parents don't accept them, and says of their parents, "F them." And he said, "I'm your parent now," which is obviously, a provocative thing to say. I would say not appropriate for a teacher to say.
I would say it's a fireable offense.
And he was.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
I think that it's important for LGBT kids to get validation and respect so they don't have, psychological problems in their developing years and into adulthood. And if your parent doesn't accept you, that's a serious problem. So I think this particular teacher's heart was in the right place, trying to say to kids, "Hey, look, people, you're not the problem. Nothing wrong with you for being LGBT." Clearly didn't say it in a proper way, and certainly not the right way for a teacher to say it. So
this also speaks to a very fundamental sense that we have as conservatives, that the state, that the fundamental role of society, and it's like prior to everything else, is the family.
Mm-hmm.
And that parental rights should trump the state, and that the state, if the state wants to really engage in social engineering, they get to your kids and they indoctrinate them.
Right.
And so this is a fear, this is a suspicion. It's really confirming a suspicion that we have. Now, I think parents have the responsibility. They are the parents. And so anyway.
Well, what Libs of TikTok did was to define this as a type of grooming. And that's where I think this becomes, it's one thing to say, that's an important thing to say, you shouldn't be a teacher anymore. I don't really endorse the idea of going on witch hunts and trying to get teachers fired for trying to validate LGBT kids. I'm not endorsing that in any way. I do think in this particular case, what was particularly said, I understand why that would be fireable. And I don't think that what that person was doing is a form of grooming. That saying, "Hey, LGBT kids, you're okay," is not the same as "I'm a pedophile."
I totally agree with you. Let me ask you this, because here's part of my concern / question. And again, I'm not up to speed as much as I should be on Taylor Lorenz or whatever the name is. But is what she's doing activism or retribution? Or is it purely a disinterested journalism like an artist might observe? My concern would be that she has a big megaphone and a lot of power, and that she can basically go after her personal or political adversaries using the guise of, "Hey, I'm just here investigating the story." And that's a lot of power. That if you work at the Washington Post, with great power comes responsibility.
Well, I don't think this person is operating on the "I have great responsibility" framework. This person's out to cause kick up a lot of dust.
Who's this person? You're talking about Taylor, or are you talking about the
Libs of TikTok person?
Okay, but I would assume that a Washington Post reporter, we would hold them to a higher ethical and sort of standard, journalistic standard, than some random person who might have a lot of followers, but still a rando on Twitter.
Well, I think that's fine, but again, I've not heard an actual critique of what was wrong with the story. People are saying, how dare she knock on someone's door? Guess what? That's reporting. Reporters have been knocking on people's doors since reporting began.
But they outed, this person was anonymous, right? And they outed them and named who they were and where they worked, I think, or what job they did. Is that right?
I think that's right. But
so to me, that's the.
But I don't. You're doing something in the public sphere. You're there. I think a conservative would say there's no constitutional right to privacy that's in existence. You don't have an automatic right to stay anonymous if you're doing things that are affecting other people's lives.
Okay, but
journalists are allowed to. I mean, it's not like she broke into her house. She gathered publicly available information, and then it didn't just go based on that. She then wanted to do additional reporting, like talking to the actual human beings to get their perspective on it. I mean, she could have done a hit job on without even talking to her. But she reported. That's what reporters are supposed to do. And you would expect that in almost every other circumstance, except when it involves someone that's on quote unquote your team, and now all of a sudden it's an invasion of privacy.
I would wonder what her motive is. Is she doing this purely because Libs of TikTok have become a big sort of important social media platform, and for the public good, we will look into this? Or is it because I don't like their agenda? Or maybe they said something about her, or I don't even know. But like, is this a personal or political agenda? Or is she doing this purely as a curious, intellectually curious journalist? And I think there's a sense that maybe it's the former and not the latter, but I'm not sure.
I mean, I can't speak to her. I mean, everyone's got biases. Everyone has perspectives. I can't tell you if there was some progressive TikTok account that was smoking out. I mean, I think actually I do. I mean, I think those accounts do exist. I've trying to find video of crazy things conservatives say. Maybe there's a story to be written there that hasn't been written yet. I don't know if there's one that has had the same impact that the TikTok has, where someone is trying to be anonymous and doesn't want to be revealed. If that's, certainly a similar type of account on the left is worthy of the same coverage.
So about a decade ago, I sort of realized how sensitive this issue is about a decade ago, when there was someone, kind of a prominent conservative blogger, who was really trolling me on Twitter. And this person and I have since become friendly. But at the time, this person said something very bad about me, very abusive and indefensible. And again, like we've since made out, but at the time I was a blogger and I needed a lot of content, and I was also probably pissed off. So I decided I wanted to do a piece basically called "Confronting My Own Troll," my own Twitter troll. And I tried to talk to this person and do an interview. They wouldn't. But I talked to this person was like a consultant. So saying horrible things about me, but also someone who was in the journalism and political world working as a consultant for people. And I reached out to those people and those companies. And I'm like, look at what this, I'm someone that you deal with on a professional basis. This is someone who works for you. Like, what do you say? And I got so much pushback on Twitter from people. It's like defending the person who called me these horrible names and made these horrible, allegations about me. I turned out to be the bad guy. People thought, and I didn't even know what canceling was. This is like a decade ago. But in hindsight, it did occur to me that I should not have, I made a mistake. I think we were both in the wrong. I should not have done what I did. But it's the first time that I realized how sensitive people were to this idea of taking something that someone said on the internet and then trying to alert other people about it and hold them accountable for it. And I feel like this is like the latest iteration of that phenomenon.
I want to shift gears quickly to the National Review cover story by Roy Teixeira, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, which I'm sure I'm not.
I think it's Texera.
Okay.
I'm joking. I told you before, I think it's Teixeira, but
I got a dog whining at me downstairs, so I can't spend too much time on it. But Roy co-wrote the book, The Emerging Democratic Majority, back in 2002, which popularized the idea that, demographically the country was becoming more racially diverse and progressive, and that was going to benefit Democrats over the long haul. And whether you think that analysis was right or wrong depends on your perspective, how you interpret the last few elections. I would say he was definitely more right than wrong, and I think he would even say, we never said the Democrats had to ignore the white working class. There were always going to be a piece of the coalition. And they needed some of those votes to win the elections that they have won. Now for the past several months, he's been arguing the Democrats have gone too far left on race and on crime, and their brand is terrible, and they need to essentially break free from wokeness in order to get back on track. And he wrote a cover story with that argument for the National Review, and I believe on his Substack or email newsletter, he said it's only published there because liberal publications wouldn't publish it. And I got asked by the National Review to write a short response to it for their letter page, which I did. And I'm in the midst of trying to work on a larger critique of it. Because on one hand, I'm sympathetic to Roy in that, I've written plenty of things about Democrats have to be careful not to veer too far left on this or that. At the same time, his counsel, which is essentially, they should support the recall of Chesa Boudin and the San Francisco DA, and they should be hammering Democrats who are for defund the police, that sort of thing. My attitude is, number one, a lot of this has already happened. Biden's already been rejecting defund the police since 2020. They just passed a budget bill that gives more money to police departments. You got a whole slew of mayors, Democratic mayors, who just got elected who rejected defund the police. So the problem is that too many people are assuming that the far left tail is wagging the dog when they're not. So don't give credence to that argument when it's not even accurate, number one.
Part of the problem is the libs of TikTok, though, right?
That's sort of thing. I mean, you're finding a TikTok of some random Oklahoma teacher and saying this is the Democratic Party, which I don't think is a fair argument. And I think what Roy's doing is giving some validation out because he's acknowledging that Biden doesn't necessarily do these things, but he's saying that they're getting tagged with it, and so they have to do more to separate themselves. Although you might say, I haven't heard Roy on this point, but, Biden did come out against the Don't Say Gay bill, as the other Florida Democratic, candidates running for governor.
Not only come out against it, but I forget the rhetoric, but it was pretty harsh rhetoric. It was pretty heated. Do you remember what he said?
He had a tweet. I want to see if I can dig it up quickly.
And while you're looking, I would just say, there's a way of looking at the bill as like a parental rights bill that basically, and this isn't, remember, this isn't for all kids. It's for like kindergarten through third grade.
So the tweet was, I want every member of the LGBTQI plus community, especially kids who will be impacted by this hateful bill, to know that you are loved and accepted just as you are. I have your back, and my administration will continue to fight for the protections and safety you deserve. This is why this is such a difficult issue.
That sounds fine. I didn't hear the...
Oh, maybe there's something else that he said that I'm not aware of.
That doesn't seem too incendiary. I thought it was worse.
But, there was this was on the White House account. Maybe this is, I don't know if this is better or worse from your perspective. Today, conservative politicians in Florida advanced legislation designed to attack LGBTQI plus kids. Instead of making growing up harder for young people, POTUS is focused on keeping schools open and supporting students' mental health. This is why this is such a tough issue. It's about kids. from both perspectives, it's about kids. From the progressive perspective, kids will be harmed if they're told that who they are, there's something wrong about who they are. And on the conservative side, they're saying these kids are being indoctrinated and groomed, and parents' rights aren't being respected. Obviously, all these issues, I mean, you go back to abortion and parental notification and consent.
Yeah. I think the fundamental problem is taking our kids and putting them in a government bureaucracy. My kids go to a Christian school that this is not going to happen.
I mean,
and once you enter into like that public domain, where the government is basically telling you like they go here or it's truancy. Honestly, look, I get why conservatives feel the need to fight the culture war, but at a micro level, the answer is like homeschooling, more homeschooling. And we're seeing it. I mean, COVID really changed the game on that. But like, look, I don't think anybody should be jerks or mean or anything like that. But I do think parents should have responsibility over their children. And, I forget who it was, but somebody made this really interesting point. They said, like, these people on the right, they think that their kid's teacher is chomping at the bit to like indoctrinate them into transitioning into a different gender. And yet they're willing to send their kids 8 hours a day, thinking that a law is going to change, is going to change what's going to happen when you send them somewhere for 8 hours a day. Like, that's the problem.
Well, homeschooling argument aside, what's obviously very hard here is when there is a disconnect between, child identity and parental worldview. And that's going to be a hard conversation, no matter how
it sucks. But like, who gets to make that, call, the parent or the teacher? Mm-hmm. And see, that's fundamentally the thing. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. It's like these people there's a disagreement. The state or the teacher believes X, the parent believes Y. Who is responsible? Who gets to make that call? And obviously there are occasions when a parent is like abusive to a point where the state intervenes and removes the child from that home. But like, what point is that? Is it disagreeing over, whether they should be given some hormone? You know what I mean? Like that is the fundamental thing we fight over. It's like once we empower the state to step in under certain circumstances, where does it end?
So I would argue as a political matter, I think it's wise for Democrats to abandon the rights of LGBT kids.
Wait, you say you think it's wise?
I don't think it's wise.
I don't think it's wise.
I don't think you look at what happened in the 90s with gay rights, where Bill Clinton was trying to be the gay rights candidate, said gays could show up openly in the military in 1992. He then gets twisted into a pretzel in 1993, has to accept the don't ask, don't tell policy. He then they become concerned that they've gone too far culturally, and so they panic and they sign the Defense of Marriage Act in 1996, which becomes something that hangs over them like a dark cloud, for a long time among progressives. Although in the Bush years, they were running for the hills as Republicans were pushing, anti-gay marriage ballot initiatives to juice turnout. And I would argue they didn't successfully juice turnout. But then by early Obama, Supreme Court rules same-sex marriages are constitutionally protected. The polling changes on a dime, and and now Democrats who were being political in the 90s have to answer for their political transgressions. And I don't even think that they largely benefited from the dance they were doing in the 90s. I mean, you can argue different ways. You know, Paul Wellstone survived politically voting for Doma. You know, Bill Clinton did get reelected. You know, so it's not like there was no political upside for him in the short run. But you know, Bush won anyway in the 2000s. So I don't necessarily think it was because of those things. I think you can be principled. I mean, the thing that Roy talks about is the notion that to the median voter, you don't care about what they care about. You care about all these minority rights things. You don't care about what regular people care about. And I think the way to handle that is you should not abandon your principles when it comes to civil rights protections and equal rights, but you got to keep your eye on the ball of the bigger economic issues. If inflation was 2% right now, no one would care about what Democrats feel about transgender issues. Biden ran in 2020 defending transgender rights. Biden ran in 2020 saying, I'm going to put a black woman on the court, you know, no matter what. And he still won middle of the road voters doing so. It's only because the economy is seen as bad right now that you have this vulnerability. You can say, hey, you care more about this than that.
Well, I think you're right in the sense that by far the biggest problem Biden has is inflation. I would argue some of the problem with inflation was probably on account of the larger problem where Biden does kind of give in to the left. And I think the spending probably didn't help the inflation. But I do think that there's a difference between a politician who talks about being compassionate when it comes to like the trans issue, being tolerant, whatever, versus indoctrination. And I think that's a huge distinction. Like, I think most people, including most conservatives in this day and age, really don't care what you do that much.
Well,
like,
but here's the problem.
But
there is some actual indoctrination happening. I've not seen any evidence of a teacher trying to make somebody transgender, make somebody gay. I've not heard any of that. I mean, the problem is you have certain conservatives that think that, you know, transgender kids don't exist, that they shouldn't be told that that's okay. And so by validating what the kid is saying, you're hurting that kid.
No, you're indoctrinating. There are examples. I mean, there was a case down in Florida of a woman. I could look her up, but basically her child was confused and wasn't sure, and this is my recollection here, like essentially encouraged by the teachers that she may be trans or he may be trans, and we're not going to. And by the way, we're definitely not talking to your parents about this. And I told you about a friend of mine whose kid, goes to like a preschool or something. And, it was like they don't use the word mommy or dad. You can't say mommy. You can't say daddy. They say at the beginning of the day, like, do you feel like a boy today? If you do, go sit on this side of the room. Do you feel like a girl today? Go sit on that side of the room. That just strikes me as really weird. Like, that's not a kid coming to you saying, "Hey, listen, I'm confused. I'm having a problem. I think
the first case you said was.
Well, but there's also a difference between someone saying, "I think I am a woman," versus, I'm confused, or I don't know. Some days I feel, some days I feel like a boy. Some days I feel like a girl. That's But my point being, I don't think most people care what you or someone else does, but we do care about our kids. And we do care, like, if you tell me I have to use this pronoun, now it's me. If you tell me I have to bake this cake, Now it's me.
Okay, but this is the case in Virginia where there are certain teachers rebelling. I'm not going to use the pronouns that the kid is asking me to use. This isn't even the parents upset about the transgender identity. It's the teacher getting in the way of what the kid wants to happen, and the teacher's political view, and I think even said explicitly the religious view, that this should not be, sends a message to the child. There's something, but my teacher, this authority figure, says there's something wrong with me about how I feel. Like that's, I don't think a Democrat should abandon that kid. And I don't think it's a case of indoctrination. It's not indoctrination to say you're a public school employee. There are rules you have to follow as a public school employee, and this is one of them. It doesn't. If you have different views, you can voice them in your own time. But when you're working for the government, you follow government rules about how you treat children. This is one of those things.
Which is why I think the big problem is that we all send our kids to a bureaucracy for 8 hours a day where people, well, I won't criticize teachers because God knows they're all heroes.
Like I do need to jump because I got to take this dog out.
But some of them I wouldn't let watch my Cocker Spaniel. Some of
them. Always good to talk to you, man. Anything you got to plug before we sign off?
Yeah, I'll be quick. Good podcast in the last week or so. I talked to Megan McCardle, David Frum, and Matthew Continetti about his new book, The Right. So go to Matt Lewis and the News and listen to the podcast.
All right. I don't know if I have anything to plug at all off the top of my head. I have a couple things in the monthly lately. I think the last one I did was about Putin, Ukraine, and the UN. I love talking about the UN's history, Matt. So I get to retell that story about how the UN Charter came to be and how that has direct relation to the whole question about what should the UN be doing now. Zelensky has said outright, if you can't, get rid of Russia off the Security Council, what are you even doing here? Yeah. And that issue was part of the negotiation of the charter itself. What happens when there is a dispute in which a permanent Security Council is a member? Does that member have veto power or not? That was a huge sticking point in the negotiation of the charter, and the way it was resolved was that you keep your veto. So it's not a simple matter to just.
You like your veto, you keep your veto.
Right. So anyway, the history is interesting. It has relation today, and I lay that all out in the monthly. So check that out there. And I think we're going to try to talk next week, right, Matt?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Take care.
See you guys.